All right, Neil Patel, thank you so much for joining us. It's awesome to have you here on the webinar.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm really excited, Neil, to get to talk with you. I mean, we first connected, I guess, a couple of years ago at the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. We were giving a talk to a bunch of entrepreneurs there. But the first thing that I wanted to know, I've read your whole book. I got a review copy beforehand. I thought it was great. But I was expecting you'd probably write a book about online marketing. Yeah, that's it. Sort of seems like the logical choice for you to be going deep in, because that's really what you've made your name in. But instead you've come out with a book called Hustle about these character virtues and how to obtain them, and in part about your life and your co-author's life stories, which I thought was really cool. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the genesis of that and why that was your topic.
Sure. So you are correct. In most cases, almost all cases, everyone assumed I was going to write a book about marketing. I myself thought I was going to write a book about marketing. If I do write more books, I would say not just the next one, but all of them would be about marketing. I wanted to create one broad book. So if you look at the online marketing landscape, I've pretty much captured most people in the online marketing world, especially in the United States. If you go overseas, I'm probably one of the biggest names in online marketing. I'm not trying to say I'm great or I'm amazing or anything like that. It's just the stats and the data. Like you look at Google Trends, you can plug in marketers' names, and I have the biggest brand so far, quote unquote, in online marketing, or one of them. Like Seth Godin's big, and there's a few others. Gary Vaynerchuk's big, but Gary does a lot of motivational stuff. I wanted to reach a new audience. I wanted to get people before they created that business and help them out. So I thought that was one good reason to write a more broad book. The second reason too is when it comes to marketing, there's one problem that I haven't solved when it comes to writing a book about it. Most of the stuff I would consider writing a book on, it wouldn't be valid in 3-4 years. The book would have a really short shelf life, because I'm not theory based when it comes to marketing. I'm very tactic based, and the tactics change over time. And the whole concept of Hustle was Patrick, Jonas, and we were all sitting, and we were talking. There was people brought it up, in past, like in the book, we talked about a lady who pushed me at a conference, talking to me how you can't be successful unless you come from money or privilege, of type background, or have great education. And we were discussing how the middle class is depleting, and we were just like, you know what? Why can't we help more people succeed? Not necessarily in creating a business, but just helping more people succeed. It could be as simple as helping them climb the corporate ladder, helping them accomplish their dreams and their goals, right? So that's how the whole process started. It was a long 1.5 years, 2 years. And the co-authors were great, publishers great, just the process is long and it's exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I know firsthand that is true. I'm also curious too, as someone who is an online specialist, Neil, why a book was a medium that was important to you? Like, why isn't that an anachronism, or why do you think a book can be useful rather than just continuing to? I mean, you had mentioned wanting to reach new audiences, but presumably, even if you were blogging about these new topics, that would perhaps be a way to do it.
Yes, and when you blog, you can reach more people. It's quicker and it's more affordable, and you don't have to deal with all the headaches of publishing a book. But there's one thing. I'm not a published author, and it's just something on my bucket list to do. There was no real reason I'm creating a book versus continuing the blogging. As for blogging, I'm everywhere though. I write a ton of content on my own blog, neilpatel.com. I write a ton of content on like Entrepreneur Inc., Fast Company, Forbes, etc. So just trying to look for new mediums, new channels. Even started podcasting. Why? Because there's only so much I can do from blogging. I just have to try new channels to grow.
Yeah, that's very cool. I like that. So, Neil, the participants in my online course that I'm doing who are here joining us, it's a course about how to become a recognized expert. And we're focused on the strategies behind that. You have built up a really strong brand, obviously, in the world of online marketing. I'm curious if you wouldn't mind laying out for people a bit about what it was like for you in the early days. I mean, obviously, once you gain traction, things become easier because the opportunities start coming to you. But in the earliest days, when you were just starting out, what was your strategy for getting known and building a reputation for yourself?
Sure. I would say my strategy was try drastic things. So
Drastic. Tell me
yes,
what you mean.
when you're starting off, no one knows you. You have to make a name for yourself. So I would go for crazy tests and wins. For example, when I first started out, there was no Facebook, there was no MySpace. MySpace eventually came about, so did Dig, Reddit, Facebook, etc. But I made a name for myself, which most people don't realize. It's not an SEO. I first created my name in social media marketing as a guy who was able to leverage social media sites really quickly and get corporations a lot of traffic. So I'll try drastic, crazy type of content to see if I can succeed at that.
Okay, give me one or two examples.
Sure. 22 things you didn't know about death. And like one of them was after a person dies, they're still alive for like extra 6 or 7 seconds. Talk about a way to go. Like I just put a ton of stats like that. And then all true stats and research it. My stat right now could be off because I wrote that article like over 10 years ago. But you get the point. I'm trying to create drastic forms of content and see if they would go viral. And we did it, and it did extremely well. Like that article was for an insurance company who sold life insurance.
Wow.
So it was really relevant. But that's an example of something drastic I did. I also did an experiment. This was last year, was the year before where I blogged about it. I talked about how spending like $100,000 on clothes made me like X more dollars in revenue. I don't know. Have you seen that
I
post?
did see that actually. Yeah, that was really great, and yeah, perfect example of a very, let's call it an extreme hypothesis.
Yes. And they're just so crazy. And my pitch on that wasn't you should go spend a lot of money on clothes. I was just saying it's just the reality of the situation from what I tested. The next one I'm writing it on, I'm actually homeless right now. So I sold my home and I netted out after taxes, fees, everything, 2.5 million bucks. So I'm actually in a Word document right now. I have it open. I only have the headline. I haven't even started it. But the headline is my $2.5 million experiment. What happens when you pour $2.5 million into a personal blog? And it's just like crazy. I'll spend $2.5 million over 12 months. And it's just so ridiculous. And I know most people can't do those kind of things, but you can do a lot of the things that was on the during my early days. So whatever your profession may be, for example, I'm a marketer. I'd reach out to Jason Calacanis when he said SEO was bullshit years and years ago. And I said, I challenge you. I challenge you that I can increase your traffic by like 20% within X amount of time. And we did a contest and we made it live in public and I hit the goals and he's just like, oh, give me more of this SEO crack pipe or whatever it may be. But that's the kind of stuff I did early on to really build my brand.
That's really interesting. So a question came in from Robbie. I just want to ask a quick one, quick follow up of my own first, which is, in what way, Neil? I mean, obviously, I don't want you to give away too much since clearly it's a post you're writing. But broadly speaking, in what way are you going to invest $2.5 million in your blog?
Yeah. So what most people don't know is my blog's in English. It's in Portuguese. It's in Spanish. It's in German. I'll get into Italian. I'll get into Arabic, a few of the other markets. I have teams in different regions. I'll talk about international expansion. I'll talk about how much I spend in PR in the US and the results from it. I'll do crazy giveaways. Like maybe in a month or two, I'll do like American Express Centurion card, which is like a unique card that they give. It's nothing special, but people like it. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
it's the black one, right?
Yeah. So I'll
Yeah.
give away a black Amex with 100 grand on there. And all you have to do is just leave a comment on why you deserve it. That there's no real reason. Like I'm just going to try crazy drastic things like that. I'm also taking, did you read Dan Price? Everyone saw it on the news how he gave his guys a minimum salary like 75K or 60.
Yeah, from Gravity Payments. Yep.
Yeah, so we're going to test things like that in different markets like Brazil where people struggle. and they're in a recession. We're just like, we're going to try press concepts that worked here and do it in Brazil. I'm going to try things like all revenue made in Brazil, the team members get a keep. I take none of it back. Like they pretty much keep even though I own the company, they keep all the money generated. I pay for all the expenses. I'm going to try like drastic things like that to see how quickly it can help grow a blog. Because I believe the more press you get, the bigger your brand gets, bigger the brand, indirectly you can monetize. But I'm just going to try crazy things.
That's amazing. So do you have a sort of working hypothesis? Are you thinking like, okay, I suspect that in a year this will be the case, or are you just like, who knows, let's see?
I suspect that in a year my brand could be double the size. And I do believe the bigger your brand, the more money you can end up making indirectly. How? I don't know, but I believe I'll be making more revenue.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, I can't wait to follow the progress of that. Now, the question that Robbie had was he wanted to know, since you were mentioning doing these extreme tactics, if there were any instances where your efforts backfired.
Yes. So one tactic I did was I went to Instagram and I paid a bunch of guys, moms, fathers, girls, everyone to hold up a sign and say, "Who is Neil Patel?" Because I looked at the pure sheer numbers. A Super Bowl ad costs you what? Was it 4, 5, or 6 million? It's expensive. It gets seen by a bit more than 100 million people. On Instagram for $25,000 a month, I was able to reach almost 40,000 people, 30 to 40 million people a month, which is a lot of people, all by having different type of people hold up signs that says, "Who is Neil Patel?" So I had one guy who was like a muscly guy and he's like flexing. And then it's like, "Who is?" And then on his chest, it's Neil Patel and he's bouncing it up and down. Right. And I thought that was hilarious. No backlash there. I didn't pick what these guys had to do. I told them to get creative. There were some female models who held up signs who also said in half naked clothes, "Who is Neil Patel?" I didn't tell him not to wear clothes or to wear clothes. I didn't tell the guy to hold up muscles. I just said, get creative. Right. And when you pay these people, they have requirements. Like the half naked model gets her followers because she is half naked. Right? I'm not judging. I'm just saying it's the reality. And I paid an agency to just do it all because I'm not going to go and find a ton of Instagram people, reach out and try to pay them one off. Like it's just too much work. And out of the 25 grand I was spending each month, 5 grand was going to the agency, 20 to all the people I was paying. And people only saw the girls. And then I got so many remarks saying I was sexist. And then I stopped it. But when you prepay them and they're like, "Oh, we're going to post it anyways." I took that picture. I'm like, no, don't post a picture. But what could you do, right? So that backfired. It didn't really hurt my brand too much. I still have a large female following. I learned entrepreneurship from my mom. It's not like I disrespect women or I treat them some way or another. Like my sister runs all accounting and finance. I think she does a better job than me. She pays attention to details. In many aspects, she's a better entrepreneur than me. But I would say that's one experiment that had a negative effect. And it's my fault. I have no excuses. It doesn't matter if I use a third-party company or not. I should have thought about it like, hey, when you pay whoever, what are they going to hold up in a sign? Like, what kind of pictures are they going to take?
Yeah, that makes sense. That it's very creative, though. That's very cool. So, Neil, one thing that you alluded to in the book that I was curious about was, in the spirit of talking about your personal hustle journey, you talked about how you were starting out, you were 21 years old, you were already in business, and you had managed to get $1 million in debt when you were 21, which has to involve some serious creativity. I'm assuming you didn't spend it all on booze and girls. So what did you do to get $1 million in debt? And then how did you get out of $1 million of debt when you were 21 years old?
Yeah, so I started doing many businesses. When you start making money and you're young, I was foolish. I didn't realize the core power of focus. So what I started doing was just a lot of random things. One of them was a cloud hosting company. All right, cloud computing, cloud hosting. And at the time, it wasn't popular. I'm not saying I was the first one to create the idea. It was a race. And we lost. I spent over $1 million in it. Most of the money was borrowed. And we lost it all because of poor execution. Idea was great, just really terrible execution. And the people who were doing that business, or I was doing it with, just didn't care. And also they were getting money from it every single month. So what eventually ended up happening is I had to shut it down and I had to repay all the people I borrowed the money from. I didn't get an investment. I borrowed money from family and things like that. And if I borrow money, I'm going to pay it back. So what I ended up doing, my co-founder and I at the time, we focus on our skills. Our skills were marketing. So I focused on just going back to the grinding board, doing consulting, and within 12 months, it was all paid back.
That's fantastic. So Neil, how did you get into this in the beginning? Because obviously, if you were doing enough to be $1 million in debt by the time you were 21, you started being in business for yourself. What, you were 18? Like, how did that happen? How did you get on that path?
Sure, 16. My sister worked for an Oracle financial consultant, and he would go into supermarkets like Whole Foods and tell them, at that time, I don't think Whole Foods was popular, but let's say Whole Foods, and he would tell them what to order when and where to place it on the shelves to maximize the revenue for the space and maximize profitability. And that's called, he was using Oracle Financial Consulting or their software, and he was certified. He was making 200 plus bucks an hour. So I was like, I want to be an Oracle Financial Consultant. I didn't even know what Oracle was. I was just 16 years old. So I went to monster.com, applied for a lot of jobs that were Oracle Financial Consulting related, and I didn't get any because I didn't have a college degree, which was required, and I wasn't Oracle certified, which was even a bigger requirement. But I saw monster.com making a ton of money because their publicly traded financials were on the web. I created a duplicate version of monster.com, a shitty duplicate. I thought I was going to be rich, and no one came to my site. Paid a few marketing firms, got ripped off. Through frustration and being broke, I had to learn marketing on my own. I got good traffic to my site, and then I still made no money because I didn't know how to monetize. I was like, forget this. I'm just going to go to college. And while I was 16, I took nighttime classes at a community college. So that way, when I do go to college, right when I was 18, I would finish faster. And my first class was Speech 101. I gave a speech on how Google works. And one of the guys in there said, my company's looking for someone like you. They ended up paying me I think it was 3,000 something. And then it quickly got to 5,000 a month. And as they're paying me 5,000 a month, I wasn't doing much work, let's say 10 hours a month or something like that. I made an extra $25 million a year in revenue.
That's amazing.
And then I was like, oh, I thought I was getting the bigger end of the stick. And I'm like, oh, I definitely am wrong on this one. But I didn't care. I was doing well for him. It was easy money for me. And the owner, his son had an ad agency. And they introduced me Blue Cross, Countrywide at the time, which is now owned by Bank of America. A few other companies. Next thing you know, I was making $20,000 a month while I was 16. And that's how I got started. And it's not all, the grass isn't all green. I don't have a perfect story. Although I was making a lot of money, I was reinvesting it all. So I wasn't seeing any money in my pocket till I was probably 22, 23 years old is when I started taking a salary. So from 16 all the way to then, it doesn't matter if that was revenuing 500,000 a year or 1 million or 3 million. I was just taking all the money and putting it back into the business.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal story, though. I love that. So Neil, in the book, you talk about some strategies that I thought were really interesting, and maybe we can get into them a little bit. These were strategies developed by you and your co-authors that sort of encapsulate the hustle philosophy. One of them was the so-called obliquity strategy, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how one can apply it in their own life.
Yeah, so I want to first go back and talk about how you implement it in your life.
Ooh, okay, excellent. Well, in terms of, so for anyone who has not yet read the book, which I'm guessing is probably going to be most of the viewers because it just came out, maybe you can first just encapsulate for them what the obliquity strategy is, and then I'm happy to answer it, and then we can parlay back and forth. Does that sound good?
Yes. So a lot of people believe if you want to go to point A to point B, you pretty much have one way to get there, right? And you just have to fall in line and that's it. But that's not always the case. There's many indirect ways to get there, right? Different approaches.
Yep, absolutely. So great summation, and that's people talk about oblique angles or whatnot, and that's what that refers to. So in my own life, and I'd love to hear about yours as well, but in my own life, I have done this a ton actually, and I had never heard it coined that way, obliquity, but I like it as a concept because it's something that I actually talk about pretty frequently, which is that especially for me as someone who has a lot of interests, kind of a Renaissance person, I whether I'm advising people or talking about it a lot, I get questions about whether you should specialize or not. And for me, I just felt constitutionally incapable of specializing. It was really terribly frustrating to me because I feel like in many ways, you can sort of get places faster if you just have this niche and bore down into it. But for some people like me, it's just like, oh, I can't bear to do it. And so instead, what I have done is I've kind of done a lot of things. I was a journalist and I ran a nonprofit and I was a political communications operative and I made documentary films and I did all these things. But it was kind of in that randomness that they all cohered. And I think ultimately, even though it was in some ways a little bit of a slower path, it enabled me to get farther because I had a bigger baseline of contacts and skills to draw upon later on.
Yes, and you mentioned one thing, right? And everyone listening, Dorie made a really good point here. So in life, when you're trying to get to your final destination, whatever may be your goal, you may not always know what it is. You may not always know what the right path is. But when you start doing a lot of different little things, you can A, learn what you love and what you hate. And B, it creates and opens doors that could potentially lead you down a path that's much more rewarding and fulfilling. Most people think that if you want to be a doctor, you just go to school and you get a degree and that's it. And in most cases, if you want to be a doctor because of the legal requirements in different countries, that's usually how it's done. But not every profession or journey has to be that way. For example, my CTO, he's an awesome engineer, one of the best, co-founder of one of my companies, and so many large Fortune 1000 companies would die to pay him millions of dollars a year to just do their engineering. He could have gone to school to become an engineer. He doesn't have a college degree. He got it purely by building his own apps and games and stuff like that when he was younger, and that's how he got into engineering, right? So he went the indirect route. I became a marketer. I didn't become a marketer by trying to say, I'm going to go to school for marketing, although I technically did. I landed into the marketing realm by going to college classes, giving a speech about marketing. Someone empowered me. But before that, I tried creating my own website. I paid some marketing firms, got no results. I had no choice but to learn marketing on my own. But the big point that we're both trying to make across here is to get to your final destination, you don't have to go into a line. If you're at A and you have to get to Z, you don't have to go A, B, C, D, etc. all the way to Z. There's many different angles and ways and journeys that you can get to Z. Some may be slower, some may be quicker, but in general, taking your unique approach, you'll end up finding and learning what you love in life. You'll learn what you're really good at in life, what your talents are. And if you leverage what you're talented at, your natural born abilities, you'll find that you'll typically succeed and be better at it than if you just took a random talent or random thing that you want to do in life that you may not be good at and you start focusing 10,000 hours on it so you can be a quote unquote expert.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thank you, Neil. I love it. And I'll also mention at this point for the folks who are on the webinar live now, if you have questions for Neil, please feel free to start putting them into the chat box and letting us know. If you are not able to get into the chat box for some reason, let me know. I can sort of unmute people momentarily. Although I want to remute you in case there's any noises, but I'll briefly do that just in case anyone needs to verbally ask a question. But if you have anything you want to ask Neil, either shout out now or verbally or type them into the chat box. We want to take your questions and make it be as relevant as possible. So while you're doing that, Neil, I'll ask you another question, which is if you could explain something which I thought was really interesting in your book to the viewers. Maybe we can talk about it a little more. You talked about something called the fourfold hustle path. which, sounds like a new Buddhist tenet or something. Although maybe it's the opposite of Buddhism because there's a lot of trying involved. But I like the idea of the fourfold path. Maybe you can expound on that a little bit.
Yeah. So there is four folds. The first is outside inside hustle, right? Which is you're outside and you're trying to get your foot in the door. There's inside upside hustle, which is proving your value and earning a promotion, right? There's inside outside hustle. Let's say like it's diving into entrepreneurial waters. Let's say you're like in a corporation, you want to get out and you want to do your own thing. There's also outside upside hustle, which is accelerating your entrepreneurial endeavors in essence.
Excellent. And so in terms of how these play out, can you give some examples? I know you had a lot of case studies in the book, but for the let's say the inside outside hustle, just to pick something, what would be the sort of an archetypal example of how people did that?
Yeah. So you said inside outside, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's say if you're really creative, you're stumped at work. They're limiting what you can end up doing. You want to end up creating your own business or idea or anything like that. And the company doesn't want to do it. Well, what you can do is you can keep working at the company and you can start your own thing at the side. You can try to get traction. Once it takes off, from there, you can expand. A great example of this is I had a friend named Eric. He worked at a design company. And this design company taught others how to create website design so that way you yourself can be a designer as like a career professional. Think of like a general assembly type of classes, but more online in a different company. While he was working there, he realized that he wanted to revolutionize the elderly care market, right? He wanted to make a better experience for people who are looking for their next path in life, in which retirement, to find a more suitable home and environment. And not something that just like everyone does where it's like, oh, just go pick a retirement home. But he wanted to create a really good, unique experience. So what he did is he started working on his idea. And as he started getting traction, he eventually stepped out. In addition to doing that, what he also did was he went on LinkedIn, hit up all the people in the elderly care space. And he hit up like the CEOs and founders. And he pinged them on advice on that they could take to improve their business. And when he did that, he got a lot of responses. He also said, hey, do you mind jumping on the phone? Then he also picked their brain to learn from them too at the same time. I thought that was pretty creative.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I love it. So Robbie has chimed in with another question, and of course, anyone else who wants to join in is welcome to as well. But Robbie was wondering if you, Neil, would recommend if someone doesn't currently have a brand as big as yours, would you recommend writing a sort of broad topic first book like you did? I mean, you said the goal of Hustle was to expand your audience. Or do you think if someone has a slightly smaller platform, that it would be better to start with a niche book as their first book?
I would start off with a niche book because that way it helps define your brand as well. See, if I write a book as Hustle as my first book, forget whether it does well or not. Most people would be like, oh yeah, Neil, he does like entrepreneur stuff. He teaches people how to hustle. That's not what I really do, but that's what I would peg myself as if that was my first book. Like my next book that I really want to do would be very specific that could be brand related. For example, I'm trying to brand myself as more of a marketer. I want to go around the world and take pictures of real life A/B tests and talk about how copy can affect lives. Like go find homeless people and help them out, of course, but also change their signs at the same time and show how different words can impact how much money people collect. Or take people who are going through interview processes and teach them what words to use and talk about the results of using certain words over others and what it does for their career.
Yeah, I think we all want to read that, Neil. That would be pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is be very specific with your first book. It's not about selling a lot in quantity. It's about targeting your niche and being the biggest in that niche or being a big name in a niche. A good example is Avinash Kulsek. I probably am butchering his last name. He created a book called Web Analytics An Hour a Day. Not a popular blogger when he first started. Once he released the book, his brand really started growing. You want to learn about web analytics? That's the guy. It's a really niche book, but you know what? He's the guy that breaks it all down.
Yeah, very good example. So Neil, in Hustle, you talk about another concept that I thought was pretty cool, which is your formula: mediocre plus mediocre equals amazing. What do you mean by that?
Yes, so a lot of people think you have to be the best at something. If you find your natural talent and you can leverage it and you can do quite a few things, being mediocre at it, it adds up. And if it adds up, you can actually be pretty dangerous at something. I'll give you a good example of this. When I first started marketing, I wasn't the best SEO. I wasn't the best social media marketer, but I was dangerous in a few different areas. Like, I knew enough, but when you combine it all, everyone's like, oh, cool. You know what you're talking about. You're good to go. We should work with you.
Got it. So in many ways, it's a fallacy that holds people back, thinking that they have to be the absolute best at their thing.
That's correct. You don't have to be the best at it. If you're just decent enough, you can do well.
Yeah, that's great. So Neil, going back to the webinar participants who are here, who are part of the Recognized Expert course, I'm curious if you have advice. I mean, it sounded like your strategy, which was a really cool one, was about doing these sort of bold, unexpected moves. Would you recommend that for other people, or it seems like that might be something that works for like one person because it's so unusual, but it's diminishing returns if other people do it? If you were kind of advising people in general how to go about building their brand and building their platform, what are the things that you think are most important for them to do?
First is educating. If someone goes out there and just writes really good information on how you can be better at marketing or design or be a better anthropologist or whatever it may be, or geologist, you pick, people will start respecting you. That's the first start. Then also look into speaking at conferences. You're not going to get hit up at first. That's okay. You may be shy. That's okay. Just apply to speak at conferences and take it one step at a time. You apply to 20, 30, eventually you'll get selected at one or two of them. Then the next step I would say is you can try drastic things, but I would just keep doing those three main things and see what happens, right? You educate the market, you help other people's out. Like if someone emails you, you always do best to help them out, and you speak at events. Like, it's a really simple strategy, but it works over time.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. Do you have any recommendations? Being an expert online marketer, we can ask here whether and how people should be prioritizing the method that they're communicating in, which channel they're using. Are there any, aside from personal preference, are there any clear benefits to blogging versus doing podcasts versus doing video, et cetera?
Yeah. So you're saying, when you're starting off, is there a benefit doing one over the other, or?
Yeah, exactly.
I would do not email. I would do blogging first. And the reason I would do blogging first is it goes out there, you get Google traffic, has much more longevity.
And that's really just because it's easier for Google to search the text?
Yeah.
Makes sense. Do you think over time that that's going to be changing because Google will get smarter at voice recognition?
Yes, I do think that'll change. So it's a question of when.
Yeah, makes sense. And so I'll just put out a reminder that if you're on the webinar right now and you want to ask Neil a question, please feel free to go ahead and type it in. We want to make sure that we get it in. So this will be our last call for questions. Please feel free to share them now. So Neil, I'm curious in terms of how the book positions you. Obviously, you're using it as kind of a lever to grow your brand. What do you see as the future for you? What is exciting for you, and what are you working towards?
I'm just working towards helping people grow their businesses, their sites, learn marketing. But I'm focusing on the marketing realm. I'm not thinking about the book and what it's going to do for my career. For me, more so, it's the whole purpose of the book is just to help people succeed. If more people succeed, I'm happy. But don't really care if I get anything out of it other than just helping people succeed. And for a career path, I'm just focusing. And I do believe that's what most people make a mistake on, especially with their brand. They try to do too many things instead of just focusing on what they're good at.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, especially because of your experience with online marketing, has that shaped how you're marketing this book. What are the things that you're doing to get the book out there that perhaps other people might not think of or might not be doing in a traditional book marketing sense?
Email blasts. I'm paying a ton of people to do email blasts. I know that sounds crazy, but I found that email blasts sell books better than anything else.
I think it's not crazy at all. When you say you're paying a ton of people, how are you finding them? And like, what is that process like? How did you identify who would be good for this?
I would just email out big bloggers who have like a huge audience and like email list of like 500,000, and they'll say how much to tell your whole audience about the book, and I'll just pay them, let's say like $5,000, and I'll pay 20 of them.
Wow, that's really interesting. Very cool. And I'm assuming you have particular landing pages, and you're able to track the ROI on that.
Nope, just have them go send people to Amazon.
All right. That's interesting. I would love to, as that unfolds, I'd be curious to hear more, perhaps in your blog about the effects of it. But that sounds really cool.
Yeah, it'll be in the $2.5 million monthly.
That's right. And along those lines, if you had to encapsulate what your book launch strategy is, was there kind of an overarching philosophy to how you were doing it, or what it, like at a 30,000-foot level?
30,000-foot level is just write the book. The publisher really wanted me to market the book hard. They're like, do a lot of email blasts. You're not doing enough blog posts, and they'll tell me what to do. And I was like, I didn't care. My strategy was really simple. Get people lined up to do email pushes. I'll also do email pushes. Do a ton of interviews. Get some press. Pay for email blasts. And do corporate sales. So before the book came out, I focused purely on corporate sales. So I would hit up companies big. I can help you do X, Y, and Z. Like I can help you get more conversions from your landing pages if you buy X dollars worth of books.
Oh, so you were like bartering your services essentially.
And then I would take those books and then I would just give them away to people who would be at conferences.
Yeah, that's great. That's really smart, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I mean, you hear all the time about people trading book purchases for speaking, but I've actually never heard of someone doing it for consulting services. That's a neat wrinkle.
Yeah, because I found the speaking, like my fees aren't as high as Gary Vaynerchuk's, right? Like I typically can get like 25 grand for a speech. I can't get 50 or 100,000. So I was like, this is going to take forever, but I can spend like a week's worth of time or like a few hours worth of time, convince a large corporation by $100,000 worth of books and tell them a few tweaks to make to their checkout page. And they get like 5% more sales. And I did this with like corporations that have a market cap of over $1 billion, because then it's an easy pitch. I was trading like 10 hours of my time for $100,000 worth of books.
Not bad. Not bad.
It was a good ROI.
I love it. Excellent. Well,
I was able to sell $500,000 worth of books like that.
I know. I wish we all could do that. That's incredible. It's a good. It's a really good template, an example that I think people will be interested to follow. So Neil, if people are interested in you, or they're even more to the point, they're interested in Hustle, where should we send them? How can they plug into the world of Neil Patel?
Yeah, you can just get Hustle at Amazon or Barnes and Noble. You want to learn more about me and what I do, just go to neilpatel.com.
Excellent. Neil, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.